Topic today is stored procedures. As Ray mentioned, this is material out of a class that we do, and anybody interested in the class, let us know afterwards. Topics for today: review of stored procedure coding recommendations. We'll talk about error handling, return status, passing parameters in and out. We'll also talk about a variety of performance issues, including compilation and recompilation issues. That said, I'm just going to dive right into the material. This is a large enough group that I'm not going to take questions on the fly. However, anybody who wants to ask questions, please enter them into the question area on your viewing module, on the GoToWebinar module, and we will get to them at the end, I promise. So, from the top, what is a stored procedure? A stored procedure is a modular piece of Transact SQL code. We can do almost anything within the scope of a stored procedure that we can do in a standard batch. One of the problems that we do run into with structured query language in general and stored procedures in specific is that SQL is a free format language. SQL is a free format language. As a result, people can write all of their code on one line. They can put one word per line. They can spread things out. We also have a problem with SQL in that there is a myth that SQL is self-documenting because it is an English-like language. Well, let's talk about both of those just for a moment. First, there is no such thing as self-documenting. Anybody who says that out loud, we should point and laugh. When you write code and there are things that you're doing and you're not sure whether you're going to remember what it was you had in mind when you wrote it, much less somebody else is coming in behind you, write a few notes of comments. Next, as far as presentation goes, things like indenting, things like carriage returns after selects or select lists or from or join criteria, whatever it is you end up writing. Until maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I wasn't a huge fan of that. It didn't really matter to me, and my experience up to that point had been that anybody who's looked at SQL for more than a few months or a year or two really could look at any SQL statement, know pretty much what was going on, and be able to read it, decode it, figure out what it was attempting to do, modify it if necessary. I had a minor epiphany when I was working for a customer here in the Tampa Bay area around that time, 7-8 years ago, and it went something like this. They said, "Jeff, can you modify these stored procs for us?" I said, "Sure." And I looked at the proc, and what I found was that the formatting within all of the procs was so consistent that my eye always went right to the piece of code it needed to in order to make the changes. Since then, I've been a big fan of structuring the indentation, structuring the layout. And one of the things I'm fond of saying as far as standards goes is that it really doesn't matter what standard you have as long as you have one and that standard is adhered to. If you adhere to the standards, everybody's doing the same thing and everybody's life gets easier. If you don't adhere to the standards, everybody's going to point at you and laugh. So, as we get in there, do use explanatory comments at the top of your stored procs. Use indentation consistently so that people's eyes are drawn to right portions of the code and or stored procedures and or procedure calls. Come up with a structured method of handling errors within the stored procedures. Way too many shops that I walk into do not do any error handling, which means that under some extreme sets of circumstances, you can have data that's not going into the database in some places and going in other places, giving you a lot of relational issues, if not transactional and or business requirement issues. Also develop a method for maintaining versions of stored procedure source code. There are dozens, literally, of common source code management systems. Team Foundation Server by Microsoft is one that we're starting to use more internally. But again, as long as you have one and use it, you're in good shape. Now, from the top, structured error handling and stored procedures. There are two valid options. The second option here, which has been available since time immemorial being back when I got started with SQL Server, so we're talking mid to late 80s here, yes, over 25 years in SQL Server. After each SQL statement, the recommendation used to be check the added error value. Added error is the global variable that contains the information on whether the last SQL statement was a success or not. If it was successful, you get a 0 back. If it was not successful, well, you could take some action based on the error or type of error that's coming in. Over the course of time, I know I personally started getting a little lazy. I didn't check the value of added error after every statement, only after every data modification statement, with the expectation is that if the select doesn't work, we'll know about it one way or the other. Now, at the advent of about SQL 2005, the language gained the try-catch blocks. A try-catch block is a way of saying, take all of these statements, treat them the same way from an error management standpoint. And it gives you the ability to say, okay, rather than check added error after each SQL statement, we can check it on the fly, and if anything goes wrong, it bounces right out to the error component of the try-catch block. I like try-catch blocks a lot. Couple of points. We're not going to get into the logic of try-catch blocks. This is not a Transact SQL session. But as far as the try-catch blocks go, be aware that begin and are not transactional. You need a begin tran, commit tran to be transactional. If you have begin tran, commit tran within the scope of your try-catch, make sure that you realize that if you bounce out of the try-catch, or out of the try into the catch, you haven't committed or rolled the transaction back yet. So that's something that still needs to happen. The try-catch do not change your transactional status. As far as the transactions go, we're going to talk about transactions a little bit later and how to manage transactions within stored procedures, because it causes a lot of people grief. So, always use the return statement with status codes when the procedure encounters an error, and make sure that you check the return status of the called stored procedures. Do set up defaults for parameters so that when the stored procedure is called, if the parameter is not passed, we either pick up a default or send a message back saying, hey, you forgot to pass in a parameter.